Dreamworks. Aside from Disney and Pixar, this was the animation studio that affected my childhood the most. Dreamworks is responsible for a good amount of movie franchises that I enjoyed throughout the years, from Shrek, to Madagascar, to Kung Fu Panda, to How to Train Your Dragon. Most recently, the studio has released yet another masterpiece of a film with The Wild Robot. I'll get to more of my thoughts on that movie later on, but overall, I loved it a lot. It's one of the best, if not the best movie Dreamworks has ever made. In fact, it's probably the best animated movie of the year for me. But what's so interesting about this movie is how it's from the same studio that made movies like Kung Fu Panda 4, which was mid-AF. Last year, they also released Ruby Gillman and Trolls 3, which were pretty underwhelming. But then the year before that, Dreamworks released Bad Guys and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which were some of the best animated movies of 2022. In fact, throughout the years where Dreamworks releases a banger of a movie like Shrek, they release a film like Shark Tale, which is so bad that a lot of you probably forgot about it. Inconsistency is one of Dreamworks' key characteristics that makes it stand apart from studios like Pixar and even Illumination. But why is that the case? Well, the answer is pretty simple actually. Compared to Pixar and Illumination, Dreamworks prioritizes quantity over quality, at least to some extent. Throughout the past 26 years, Dreamworks has released a total of 49 feature films. Meanwhile, Pixar has released 28 movies throughout the past 29 years, and Illumination has released 15 movies throughout the past 14 years. Now, it doesn't take a genius to recognize that this pattern represents the differences in ideology between these studios. Pixar and Illumination, while I have described them as polar opposites in the past, have a fairly similar strategy on paper. They focus on making fewer movies at a given time and make sure each of those movies are the best they can be to achieve the goal they have in mind. With Pixar, their goal is to make movies that can evoke as strong of an emotional response as possible for kids and adults alike. Illumination's goal with their movies is to make them as entertaining and funny to kids as much as possible. With Dreamworks, however, they don't really seem to have a clear goal in mind with their animated films. Each of their films tend to have very different goals to achieve. With movies like Trolls or Home, for example, Dreamworks' goal is to make a movie that makes children laugh and just casually entertain families for 90 minutes. With other movies like The Wild Robot, their goal is to tell a meaningful story with an important message in mind that makes kids and adults shed tears. Of course, some of their films tend to take an in-between approach like Kung Fu Panda, but generally, compared to other studios, Dreamworks tells a wide variety of stories with different genres. This approach means the studio can't really commit to one main purpose for their films. This may also explain why Dreamworks almost never beat Pixar, Disney, or Illumination in the box office. While these three animation studios have made at least 3 movies that grossed over $1 billion, Dreamworks has yet to achieve that with any of their films. That being said though, Dreamworks' inconsistency and lack of focus on one or two main franchises is actually something that arguably makes it one of the better animation studios in my opinion. You see, one of the key advantages for Dreamworks making more movies generally is they get to be a lot more experimental with their films compared to Pixar and Illumination. As much as I have a lot of admiration for Pixar films, one thing I do acknowledge is they don't really try to experiment much with the style of their movies. While their movies don't look exactly the same with each other, they do have a distinct 3D realistic style to them. The same goes for Illumination as well with their films. But with Dreamworks, their movies can look wildly different from each other. Back when Dreamworks started, while they did have 3D animated movies like Pixar, they still made traditionally 2D animated films around the same time. This difference in styles is especially the case with their recent movies where they incorporated this 2D, 3D hybrid style of animation. They aren't necessarily the first to incorporate this style, but they did adopt it fairly quickly with The Bad Guys, The Last Wish, and The Wild Robot being the most notable examples. The experimentation with their movies also applies to the writing of their movies too. While Dreamworks have their franchises with sequels that play it safe at times, they also have more original movies than any other animation studio for the past 25 years. Each of these films tend to have wildly different premises, from a world of singing trolls, to a battle between monsters and aliens, to bees suing humanity over honey, to a snail racing in the Indy 500. Some of these movies did turn out to be underwhelming to outright bad and or forgettable, but I have to at least give credit for the uniqueness of the story. Compare that to Pixar, and especially Illumination, their premises are definitely more grounded, at least to some extent. Either they make movies based on existing franchises that they have proven has wide appeal, or they make an original film that doesn't really stray away from people's expectations. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, But what these studios do are definitely more safe. That makes them really good assets for a corporation like Disney and Comcast. But that approach doesn't necessarily mean they're the best avenues for being able to freely express creativity. Dreamworks' approach to making movies definitely has its trade-offs, and they had a fair amount of misses as a result, but for every idea that did not work, they had another which did, and when they did work, they could work brilliantly. This year with The Wild Robot, the strengths of Dreamworks really do shine. This movie is the embodiment of what makes animation an excellent form of storytelling. When I watched it, the main thing that really stuck out to me is just how beautiful it is. As stated before, the movie had a 2D, 3D hybrids art style that a few other animated movies had adopted recently. But I think this style of animation shines the best here as it illustrates the beauty of nature as well as how dark it can be, much more so than other animation styles. Now, the animation is something that I knew I would appreciate a lot. In fact, that's one of the main reasons why I went out of my way to watch it. The trailers of this movie did an amazing job showing how beautiful it is. But along with the amazing visuals, Dreamworks paired it with great writing, which honestly took me by surprise. I mean, knowing the budget for this movie, which was smaller than other animated films earlier this year, I thought Dreamworks had to cut some corners somewhere. But nope, the movie was as top-notch as it could possibly be, with well-written, relatable characters, well-defined story arcs, and important themes for the characters and audiences to learn, like overcoming your programming or instincts, and accepting one's growth as a sentient being. On top of that, the crew behind the movie also weaved in a really good soundtrack and even a fair amount of comedic moments. This movie really has everything needed to be one of the best, if not the best movie of the year, especially since I cannot really name anything wrong with it. I guess the slight nitpick I do have is that the pacing at the beginning of the movie felt a bit too fast for me, but I say that's a nitpick because that's probably intentional. The beginning of the movie is supposed to feel fast and overwhelming because you were just dropped into a completely different hostile world like you were part of an isekai story. So if it's not abundantly clear to you already, I highly encourage you to watch this movie if you haven't yet. It has been quite a while since an original animated movie deserved the amount of praise it is getting. Yes, I am aware this movie is based on a book, so it's not an original story per se, but it is original in the movie world, and it is the first time most people are hearing about The Wild Robot. In a world where sequels and reboots dominate the movie landscape, it's really nice to see a well-made movie that is not from an existing movie franchise, and I hope as many people as possible show support for it. Thankfully, according to box office figures at least, people are coming to theaters to watch it and showing support for the creators of the movie. So as much as people like me crap on Dreamworks at times whenever they release mid to outright bad movies that didn't have to exist, it's good to acknowledge that their mistakes are oftentimes signs that they are willing to try new ideas. In a world where major studios are focused on making sequels and remakes to profit off from people's nostalgia, it's great to see a studio buck the trend and really give us something new and unique. While I do have my own biases in terms on what movies I know I'll enjoy, I'll always have respect for anyone who tries to bring something new to the table. And nowadays, Dreamworks is that studio that will, ironically, consistently do that. But of course, these are just my thoughts on Dreamworks and The Wild Robot. If you have anything else to say about them, write those thoughts down in the comments below, and please give this video a like, and subscribe for more content like this. With all that said, thank you all for watching this video. I hope you all have a great day. See you in the next one.